just hang up. You don't have to do anything. Yep.
Okay. Let's get her going. 43.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Hello out there in Packer Nation, and welcome to Absolute Packer Podcast, episode 43. This is the post-Super Bowl episode that we'll be doing. Death, taxes, and the New England Patriots winning the Super Bowl. I can't take it anymore. I can't take the success that these guys have anymore. I'm jealous beyond belief. I'll just put that right out there. So basically, now that the Super Bowl's over, the year is over, and we look forward to the draft or the new league year, which I think is like March 1st or something like that. But like I said, go ahead.
So Andy, you're the Patriot hater then? Is that who you are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot
I'm a
of
hater. Look, I'm a hater because I am jealous.
Aren't we all?
So a lot of podcasts have art, like the podcast art, to the episode art that they put with it. I so much want to use this as like the episode art, but like I'm too lazy to do that. But this would be so perfect. Like on my screen, I have Patriot hater and Brady as the goat. That is so good. it's just so awesome.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know Andy called himself Patriot hater.
Yeah.
My little name here.
Yeah, I didn't even know that when I came in. So I just gave myself Brady's the GOAT, came in, saw Patriot hater. I'm like, ooh.
Well, look, I guess I live in two spaces, at once. And one is I tip my cap to the Patriots for being just an absolute machine. And then the other is I wish they would get run over by a Mack truck.
Think about this though. They held the 11th best offense in NFL history to 3 points and like 206 yards of total offense. Or it was a 260 or something like that. It was something ridiculous.
Yeah. I also have to full disclosure, I didn't watch a single minute of the game. Because I was on a Patriot protest.
Boycott,
yeah. Patriot boycott, protest, whatever. I was not going to give them the time of day for me watching them on the TV. I watched or followed on Twitter like the last 10 minutes. And truth be told, if the Rams won, yippee-doo, I would have been much happier because they beat the Patriots. But
so I want to touch on Jeremy's comment though about the 11th best offense of all time. I question that sort of thing so strongly because you can't take every measurement into account when making a statement like that. When we look at the history of the Patriots, right? They're in like, especially when we look back, they're in a terrible division.
Yes, and their division is dog shit.
Right, and I feel like the Rams didn't have that much competition ultimately. So were they that great of an offense? And by what actual measure? Like, and are we averaging out by the games? Is it the statistical mean, the median per game? Like how are these things actually calculated? And is that an actual reflection of how good they are?
Yeah, I hear you. I look at it two ways. But go ahead.
It's tough to make the judgment of how truly great they are, but it's based off of points scored, yards, and offense efficiency.
It's stats, context. So
yep.
All stats
for the season too. So like if you start out really strong and you decelerate through the season, like you could still end up being the best of the season. Like I don't know. I really question that because boy, it really looked like both defenses were it seemed like both defenses were really strong last night or both offenses were terrible. I mean, it's really hard for me to really differentiate which was really happening. But like the offenses were not breaking away. And like it just seemed like nothing was happening, and it was I don't know, not a very exciting game to watch ultimately. But I guess if you enjoy the suspense and the strategy of football, it was probably I guess for your coach it was probably exciting.
Yeah, I don't mind low scoring games even if it's in a Super Bowl. I love the strategy and going up and down the field. Winning 48-41. I mean, it could be fun, but also it's a well played defensive game on both sides and low scoring, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, well, I think that was the lowest scoring Super Bowl in NFL
of all time.
Yes. NFL history. In NFL history, I think.
Yes.
And think about this. So I imagine Aaron Rodgers sitting at home watching this going, you mean to tell me you can win a playoff game scoring 13 points?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So speaking of Aaron Rodgers, and I was sort of half joking in our chat earlier, but I don't know if you guys saw, there's a Foo Fighters video, and there's some kind of so it was like a football parody thing, and some of the Fox guys were in it, like the Fox NFL sportscast guys, like Terry Bradshaw and I don't know.
God.
Yeah, so it was like really, it was sort of like their skits on NFL Sunday, and like the typical like Foo Fighter, like really terrible like sarcasm, funny, right? So it was good. It was good. It was like like I really like that about like Dave Grohl. But so they all had like football names, and they were like football players. The whole band was football players, and so there was a Brett Rogers on the team, and I don't know how you can be more like that, like I guess that has suddenly become like the definitive like generic quarterback name.
Brett Rogers. Interesting. Yeah. Rogers actually, kind of segueing in, that was a good segue. He did win the Never Say Never award for like not best game, but it's like best performance, I guess it was, for that fourth quarter in the first game against Chicago, which I did watch that whole thing, and that
was the only good game he had all year.
But it was incredible. I'll say that. That was incredible.
So that was the only Bears game I've ever been to, and when we left that, I said I never have to go to another Packer game again. The weather was perfect, the game was perfect, it was suspenseful. I'm like, that was the best game I will ever see. I don't ever have to see another Packer game again.
I was watching it 3 days after I woke up from my coma, so I was still kind of like, my dad was with me, and he was like pointing out what players were what, because I was like, who's this guy? Or I didn't remember half the players. Right. It's funny.
So Elliot, so when you got out of that game, you were you on the ultimate high where you were thinking this team was going to the Super Bowl?
Fuck no. Oh, you're talking to Elliot. Sorry. I'd be surprised if Elliot was in agreement too, though.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. Like, it was a really good high. Super Bowl? Probably not. No. I mean, because it was so up and down. I felt like we'd go 10-6 though. I felt like we'd get in. I felt like it was a playoff year.
Well, you know how human nature works. We're in one game. We had probably the lowest of the low,
right.
And then the second
half, leave at halftime.
20-zip it going into like late third quarter, I think.
Yeah.
And then we pulled off. So
yeah,
it's a tale of two halves. I mean, literally, we were at the bottom where we were all Packer fans. We were sitting there saying our season's done. We're done. To right. Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT.
Yeah, that was quite an up and down game.
Yeah.
But looking, I don't know where I was kind of going with some of that the Brett Rogers thing though. So I don't know if you saw the actual like the award show. Rogers goes up there and he's being all chummy. He's like, he called Favre. Did you hear that?
No.
I think he said that before.
Yeah, it's kind of goofy. He's like, hey, Brett was right next there on the stage, and he goes, hey Favre, I know that. The best thing about this season was tough, but the best thing was we both know how it feels to beat the Bears. I said like that, but he called him Harvey. It was very silly.
Yeah.
But Rodgers had that Never Say Never with the Hail Marys a few years ago, so he's won that award a couple times. But
right.
I'm gonna kind of, if you guys are okay, I'm gonna kind of shift back. Since it was a Super Bowl, and even if it's the hated Patriots, I'd like to kind of compare. And even just kind of deconstruct the Patriots and how it relates to the Packers in some respects, and even the whole league. Elliot and I were talking how, and I think I sent you guys a message on this morning, but I was just thinking, I'm going, Belichick and the Patriots, they're number one, and the next closest team guy, dynasty, whatever, is like miles behind. It's not close. Some of these stats you see about the team and what they've done are just they don't even look real. But what I was thinking about with Belichick was, and I'm like, how in the hell do you hold a team that's number one scoring offense to 3 points? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? But I was thinking and really ruminating on it, and as I really came to, I thought, Belichick is the master game planner. And it got me thinking that when the Packers have played the Patriots in the past few years, I always recall their offense, the Patriots, I should say. They're throwing Statue of Liberties, they're doing end arounds, they're doing flea flickers, they're doing all these things, with the offense. They're doing what they can to win the game. They're not beating their man in front of you. So it just got me thinking, Belichick, to me, in the Patriots, he's like the only coach that seems to recognize a weakness within the league and a trend between 31 other teams. And that trend or weakness is NFL coaches, by and large, go into a game with a game plan. They have a plan A, right? Mm-hmm. Now, none of them have a plan B. So if plan A is taken away from them, which Belichick is a genius at, he game plans and he takes away and he changed your game plan and, turns it on its head. The rest of the NFL is absolutely horrific. And McCarthy is right at the top of the list in the Packers at doing any meaningful adjustments in game. So in-game coaching is just, they may have a plan A1 or A2, but Belichick's got A, B, C, D, E, F, G on offense and defense for his own team. You know what I mean?
And I think McVay after the game fully admitted that he only had one plan going in. Truly. So he came back down to reality because he was on the ultimate high the whole year. Everybody, including myself, was saying he's the offensive guru in the league, and look what happened. I mean, he was brought down to reality in one game.
Yeah. Now, but what do you think of that statement, Jeremy, about my opinion on Belichick and how he does it and how the rest of the teams in the league, do you think that's a fair statement? I mean, that's just my own kind of hypothesis, but it seems to bear a lot of fruit, particularly with Belichick and the Patriots dynasty.
It's completely fair, and I think where he excels is when they need that one big play to get them to the next level. Thinking of Kansas City, 2 weeks ago in the AFC Championship, they had on the last drive of regulation, they were just marching down the field. And then the only drive in overtime, they converted on 3 3rd and 10s. They just have that ability to get the big play. And I think that's what separates them from everybody else in this league is when they need that big, even yesterday, I think it was 3rd and something, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3 with like over 2 minutes to go. And they needed that first down to pretty much, milk out the game, and they got it. And it was Sony Michel, I think he ran for, or no, Rex Burkhead ran for like 20 yards. Yeah. So, and the blocking was so phenomenal. I mean, they had the fullback lead. They blew up all their blocks. And I mean, Burkhead had all of anywhere he could have run.
They can change the identity of their offense mid-game completely. Mid-game. They can go from power run to quick passing to, tight ends. It's just, it is
And the other thing that really the one thing that really struck a chord with me last night was that the Patriots are they're the heaviest team to use man-to-man coverage on their defensive scheme. Heaviest team in the league. And last night, over half of their calls were zones where they had like a soft zone, and they had 5 to 6 men on the line of scrimmage, and they were bringing pressure on the majority of the downs.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
they knew the game plan was to make Jared Goff uncomfortable, because the Bears gave him that game plan when the Rams went into Chicago on Monday Night Football and the Bears beat them at home. The game plan was pretty much devised from the Bears, where they just got after Goff and they got after Gurley, and they just did not allow them to make any plays. Same thing here. They kept everything in front of them. They devised a very specific game plan to confuse the hell out of the Rams, because there were many plays where Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks were running into what they thought was a hole in the zone. Instead, they were being double covered. It was great deception. And I think they are a team that can use deception better than anybody in this league. There's just nobody else out there that can touch them.
Yeah, Belichick, and I mean, he's the defense. He's the head coach, but he's the one who basically he's the defensive coordinator de facto, if you will. And he's, like I said, he's just what he does. It's not even checkers versus chess. It's like.
Well, you give him 2 weeks to prepare for.
Oh my God, yeah, that's exactly. And they constantly get first round buys.
Right.
They take care of the division by week 10, and you give him an extra week, forget it.
Well, did you hear the stat too that their 5 losses this year were against teams that did not make the playoffs?
That's weird.
So they won the Super Bowl, basically losing to teams that never made the playoffs, but they beat all the teams that made the playoffs. So,
it's just
ridiculous.
Yeah, and then there's another.
So I guess that kind of that goes full circle back to what I was saying about the Rams. Like, what do any of these stats even mean anymore? Is everything random?
No, I mean, look, this is the interesting thing, and it's another, the stats with the Patriots, they don't lie. The stats with other teams can tend to lie. You know what I mean? You look at the stats of the Patriots, you're like, this is empirical evidence right here. This isn't, with these other teams, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this. I mean, just here's the other one I read. I think there are 2 things. I might have focused or talked about this on a previous podcast. So now this is not Absolute Packer, it's Absolute Patriot podcast, for Christ's sake.
Boo!
I know, really. But 2 things that struck me was number one, up until the Super Bowl, Brady had dropped back 90 times and hadn't been sacked 1 time in the postseason.
Right.
That is. Give me a break. And then number 2,
I know.
Talk about running backs and how they use them. There was a game. It was a play. I can't remember which. It might have been the divisional round. I'm not exactly sure. But James White had 15 targets that game.
Mm-hmm.
Not 15 rushing attempts. He had 15 passing targets. Brady threw 15 passes to his running back.
Mm-hmm.
And now take that and then just imagine McCarthy or the Packers or any of these other teams doing that. McCarthy wouldn't even give his running backs 15 attempts to run the ball in a game, and he's throwing 15 fucking passes. That is unbelievable.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Genius, And it's like, and you remember one thing we do know to compare for sure against the Packers and the Patriots for sure. Remember during the game when we played them this year, they took Cordell Patterson and he's a receiver, and they're like, fuck it, we're just going to line him up as a running back now and just run him at you. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Just during one drive, they just took Patterson and they turned him into a running back, and he jammed it down our freaking throat. Mm-hmm. That'd be like taking, Jimmy Graham on our side. I'm trying to think of, a big wide receiver or whatever.
Right.
And saying, okay, put him in the backfield and run him with a fullback in front of him as if he's a running back. It's unbelievable,
And when you mentioned in-game adjustments, I think it was in the second quarter, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but the second quarter they lost their best safety, Patrick Chung.
In the Super Bowl?
Yesterday in the Super Bowl. So they lost their best safety, and they still only allowed 3 points. Yeah. So can you imagine the in-game adjustments that had to go on there where we're thinking, oh, God, we don't have Patrick Chung anymore. How are we going to, defend this juggernaut of an offense? They did it. They did it with backups.
Yeah, and, I mean, did they get again, I didn't watch the game, but did they get a lot of pressure on Goff?
Yes, they were in his face. I would say probably 30 to 35% of the plays, they were in his face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That seems about right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be sending that much pressure, guys are going to have to be playing man. They don't have a ton of guys up there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I really started to think about it, and kind of where I'm going with it is, you always used to hear McCarthy say, a scheme is a crutch, scheme, and I think there was the absence of a scheme practically with the Packers, and the Patriots the Patriots scheme is everything,
Mm-hmm.
Scheme is everything for a team like the Patriots on both sides of the ball, and for the Packers, scheme is damn near nothing. It's just beat your man in front of you and all this kind of crap, and it's just, polar opposite. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody can tell the way the NFL is evolving. That scheme is becoming very important,
right?
And I mean, the Patriots are also out in front on the the quick, shifty slot wide receiver. Like Edelman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the only guy who can beat you, and he beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand. I mean, I guess they have to give the MVP of the game to somebody, and I guess Edelman, but I feel like. Really?
They should have given it to Bill Belichick, for fuck's sake.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you give it to the defense. I mean, both sides had an interception, right?
Brady threw a pick on the first play of the game, I heard.
First drive of the game, anyway.
First drive,
I think it was the first pass.
First pass. Possibly.
Oh, it might have been the first pass. Okay, yeah, that could be. Yeah.
And apparently, if that's true, he must have turned that sucker over deep in his own territory or in real good field position, and the Rams did nothing with it.
It was around midfield.
Yeah, it was around midfield, and they did nothing with it. Yeah, that was crazy.
That.
Yeah, that was
first
surprising.
Play of the goddamn game, damn near.
I know. I mean, and like, I mean, I feel like most of the country either didn't care much, as a result. This was the lowest Super Bowl TV ratings in 10 years.
Yeah.
Although with all the you can watch it on YouTube and you can watch it on your phone, I don't know exactly how they're tracking that and how accurate that is, but I mean, assuming it's correct, it anecdotally
people have Patriot fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was getting at. Yeah. So I think most people were slightly in favor of the Rams at the very least, right? So I mean, and that's where I was at. So I was a little disappointed that it became so defensive right away. It was a little, I don't know. I mean, when you kind of don't have anything super emotionally invested in either team, you kind of want to have some scoring, don't you?
I hear you. I mean, if you strongly dislike one of the teams and the other team you're kind of indifferent to, it's like, hey, let's at least have it be exciting.
Yeah, I want it to be exciting, and I would at least have liked the Rams to score right away. Yeah. So I'm gonna duck out. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Continue without me, and be cheery. Go back.
Alrighty.
Yep.
See that out. Okay. So it's just you and I, Jeremy. What the hell are we gonna do? No.
We're gonna talk.
Yeah. So yeah, just not much else to say about the Super Bowl, but God, like I said, it really is just incredible, the stats that you see. I gotta tip my hat. I know one other stat I saw, and this relates to the Packers. Saw it somewhere on Twitter where so Aaron Rodgers has been in his career thus far 16 playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those games have been at Lambeau Field at home?
5.
Correct. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about a crazy stat. You would never. When I saw that, I did double check. I'm like, is that? It looked like it was just straight up it was wrong. But in his entire career, 3/4 of the times he's in the playoffs, he has to go on the road.
Mm-hmm. And think about those odds.
Yeah, exactly. Likely you're a wild card. You got to play 3 games on the road. Jesus.
Well, I mean, they typically would get at least a home wild card playoff game, but then they would be on the road for the majority. Just like 2010, that was the the exception to the rule where they played all 3 games on the road to get to the Super Bowl and win it. But 2011, they had a first round bye, lost to the Giants. 2012, they were at San Francisco in the wild card, lost. 2013, they were at home against San Francisco and lost in the wild card. 2014, they had a home game, and then they went. They had a first round bye. They were the number 2 seed,
and that was the Dez catch game that they won.
Dez catch game, yep, and lost at Seattle in overtime.
The meltdown.
The meltdown. 2015, they had a home game, and then they played. Wait, was it? Yeah, 2015 they had a home and road game, and then 2016 they had a home and 2 road games. So, yeah, to me, what that stat tells me is that they were a good enough team to get in the playoffs, but they were not a good enough team to get a top seed to get home field advantage.
Exactly.
The playoffs, and I tie that back to the administration, Ted Thompson, not putting a team around anybody. He was always reliant on luck. He was always hoping that the luck of the draw would shake them through. And that's just not how it works today all the time. You have to have talent across somewhere. You have to have talent somewhere.
I remember when that did happen, when the Packers, in 2010, when they did win that, a lot of there was kind of like, it seemed like a small window there where the league kind of looked at like, hey, look what happened with them. It could, if you get in, you can get hot, and who knows what can happen. So we could build our rosters differently and all that. And that flamed out after basically 1 year.
Right.
Because, the one time they had a first round bye and everything was at home, they didn't even win a fucking playoff game. That was 2011 when the Giants came in, and they basically, they didn't get blown out, but they damn near did. And that was 15-1, and they couldn't even get one playoff win. So it tells me the same exact thing where they're going 10-6. I look at it and I go, that season they were 10-6. That season they were 10-6, and they had to just get in. And many of those, they had to go on these magical runs where Aaron Rodgers comes up with some silly ass phrase, run the table, or what was the other one I'm thinking of?
Relax.
Relax and run the table were the two. And everybody thought that was also cool. I remember thinking back, going, the problem with that is you can't do it's not sustainable, and you're beating incredible odds. They had to win like 6 or 7 games in a row just to get in,
Right. Right.
So it would be nice, and there is value, and obviously the Patriots are the exhibit A of, if you can take care of the division by week 10 and then get a first round bye pretty early. Now, I make it sound like it's easy. It is not. But given the talent the Packers have at quarterback, and during those heydays, it's such a shame, that 5 games at home to 16 on the road. Incredible.
Yeah, there's just nothing else to really say about it. It's incredible. But I felt like we had teams in certain years. Speaking of 2011, like you mentioned, 2014, I felt like we have teams that could have that should have gotten us to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 2011, that was that year where it was almost. They went 15-1, but their defense was like worse than the league.
Right.
I honestly, and I didn't think they were going to win the Super Bowl that year. I did not think they were going to lose in the divisional round. But that defense was, hell, the first game was New Orleans, I think, and they won at the very end. It was like 45-41 or something. But yeah, the defense was terrible that year.
Right.
2014, the Seattle meltdown. That was a year where they had a Super Bowl team. Period. End of story.
Yep.
And I will maintain that was the beginning of the end of the entire McCarthy regime. After that game, I think nobody really had faith in McCarthy to get him over the hump. That was a catastrophic loss when you think about it in terms of just the psyche of the entire team and organization. Now, you can't fire somebody after getting to the NFC Championship and within 2 minutes of a Super Bowl. I understand that, but looking back, it's like nothing changed until last year at all. After that, there was a good 4 or 5 years of the same exact thing, and you could just see things were getting chipped away, and you know, I gotta believe Rodgers complained that he played that game so conservative. Not Rodgers, but the game plan, everything was so conservative from McCarthy. That was the beginning of the end. I think was the 2014 NFC Championship game.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
Well, go ahead.
Well, it's just like I said, nothing changed. You know, he gave up play calling or whatever, but that was just a bunch of. I don't know. It seemed like it got very cushy. Any hires, any firings looked like they were just placated on the surface. You know, to placate whatever. You know, but they didn't have any substance to them. And any hirings, coaching hirings, they just reeked of, you know, what's the good old boy network type stuff.
Yeah.
You know, Ron Zook and crap like that. I'm just rolling my eyes, you know. So it really did get complacent after that, you know. And I think everybody knew it.
That game also.
Ted and Mark.
Right. But, I mean, the saving grace in it all was Mike McCarthy would always save his job in the second half of the year. You know, 2016, they won their last 6 games to get into the playoffs.
And I mean, it was such fool's gold. That's part of the problem too, because, you know, you're right. He would do that and he would turn it on and do whatever, but it was far too often where you had to win every damn thing just to get into the playoffs. And then, you know, like I said, it was fool's gold in my opinion. Right. It was just, and it was Rodgers doing that shit.
Yeah,
the stuff that's coming out. Yeah.
The most irritating part of the legacy was it took them to get their backs up against the wall before they started to say, "Wow, we better step it up a notch."
Yeah, no doubt.
It should never get to that point. I mean, you're playing a 16-game year. Every game is important, and I get you're going to lose some and you're going to win some. But how they would lose?
They were horrifically slow starting team under McCarthy.
Always.
The only year is 2011 where they started off like 13-0. But then the defense was horrible, and then 2015 I think they start. What was it, 6-0?
6-0. Yep.
6-0, and then they lost like 6 of their last 10, something like that. 6 of their last 10. That was when they could barely. No one was getting open in 2015. Yeah, so it's odd. I don't know.
It was a bipolar experience with the Packers. It was so up and down.
Yeah, and it just, again, more stuff that's coming out about just the state of the actual offense and just some of these moves. And, I mean, McCarthy's offense was, let's call it what it is. It was way too simple. It got figured out in 2011, the year after the Super Bowl, you know. At the end of 2011, it got figured out, and nothing was done to change that. You know, they hired Pettin, and I think that kind of helped, but that helped on the defensive side of the ball, not the offensive side of the ball. And I would maintain that every offseason move from last year, except for the hiring of Pettin, put that aside, every other move was ridiculous. It was a move that on the surface you go, this isn't going to do anything. The Pettin hire was great. I like that. But everything else, you know, the structure, and we're going to bring in Jimmy Graham, and we're going to we're scrub brush to the offense, and we're bringing back Joe Philbin. It just reeked of nothingness, you know. I
had no problem with Jimmy Graham signing, but what I did have a problem with how they utilized him. How they utilized him. I just don't feel like
McCarthy. That's the other thing. McCarthy doesn't know how to use tight ends.
He doesn't know how to use running backs either out of the backfield. I mean, like you said, James White had 15 targets in the NFC divisional round against the Chargers because the Chargers were giving him everything underneath. So the Patriots had nothing downfield, and they had everything underneath, and Brady was giving it to White because that's what was available.
Yeah.
Instead of just doing the continuous thing this year of, you know what, we're going to beat our head against the wall. We're going to get it.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of other teams, I'd love to know another NFL team outside of the Patriots that has a running back that had 15 passing targets in a game. It's not just, you know, like the Packers would be the only one. It's every other damn team wouldn't do
Christian that. Christian McCaffrey is the only other guy I can think of off the top of my head, you know.
Well, and what I'm getting at is Christian McCaffrey, he was a really high pick, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, James White, he's a good guy, but he's a running back, you know. He's just kind of like a rank and file running back. He's not some fucking superstar.
No.
So
But we've never valued running backs, to be honest with you, except for Eddie Lacy. I think that was the guy that McCarthy wanted, and that the guy he wanted just to be his bell cow, and he utilized him. But he allowed Eddie Lacy, I should say, allowed himself to get completely out of shape, and that just spiraled downward from there.
I'd almost forgotten about that. That you talk about accountability.
None. And he kept on playing him that year instead of sitting his butt on the bench and saying, you know what, get your ass, get it out of Burger King. You need to get.
I remember at the end of that year, that was the only time I think McCarthy's ever said anything publicly about a player, where he said something about he can't play at that weight, and he said it during a press conference. That was the only time I think I've ever heard McCarthy say something like that. Yeah. But then again, I'm looking at him like, well, where does the frickin' buck stop, buddy? Mm-hmm. Come on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it sounds like now we've got our coaching staff finally intact. I don't know if...
And the median age, I believe, is 21. No, I'm kidding. They are
39,
really young,
actually.
Yeah, real young. But that's a league trend that the Packers are kind of hitching on in some respect, and maybe they're going even more, even more youth. But yeah, to be honest, I don't know really any of the coaches. But yeah, I know they're young and they're inexperienced.
And they're very inexperienced. I mean, their offensive line coach was a lineman with the Packers back in 2006, 2007, a practice squad lineman, Adam Senovich, excuse me, Senovich. Very inexperienced. He was an assistant out in San Francisco until he came here to be the coach. Luke Getsy, I don't know if a lot of Packer fans recognize that name. He's back.
He's a wide receivers coach, but now he's come back to quarterbacks, right? Come back as quarterback coach.
Right. He was down at Mississippi State for 2 years as the offensive coordinator. Rodgers definitely, I think, put a good word in for him. Our wide receivers coach is rather interesting. Alvis Whitted. I don't know if anybody recognizes that name, but he was an NFL player for the Jacksonville Jaguars for 7 years. Oh, wow. So he's got some real-time experience in this league, and it's not that long ago. I think his last year was 2007 or 8, somewhere around there. Who else?
They got a special teams guy, but I don't know who the hell he is. He sounds like he's average, which even if that's the case, that's a massive upgrade.
Sean Menegna.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Not a lot of. I mean, he was an assistant special teams coach in Cleveland from 2011 to 2017. He coached last year at the University of Vanderbilt. There's not a lot of track record on him besides the fact that when he was involved with special teams, they were typically below average. Typically, not all the time, but so we don't.
I'll tell you. Well, anything's better than Zook. Jeez. Yes. I can't believe I'm saying that, but
that's a positive right there. Anything is better than Zook.
Yeah, it's egregious that, I mean, it wasn't just McCarthy that didn't. I can't pin it in the blame that didn't value special teams. It was Ted, who didn't value special. The whole damn organization didn't value.
Right.
The guys who would be on special teams, not counting the specialists like the actual kickers and whatnot, but or punter, but the guys who were on special teams coverage units and whatnot, they were always the either undrafted rookie free agents or just some of the rookies they would draft. I'm trying to think if they ever had any decent veterans on special teams. They never did. That was kind of how they'd fill out the roster there.
Jeff Janis and Jarrett Bush were the only veterans of semblance that they had. Jarrett Bush.
Janis was a good special teams player.
And I guess that was kind of where I was going to get to was Jeff Janis contributed to 2016's. 2017, excuse me. He contributed to our top of the line coverage units in the league. Punt returners were only averaging less than 6 yards per punt return. And Jeff Janis had a lot of responsibility behind that because he was continuously getting downfield, getting past his blockers, getting past double teams, and not allowing punt returners to either return the ball or they were just fair catching it. So to get to the back,
was he a returner? I honestly don't remember. Was he ever
a bit? He returned a few kicks and a few punts here and there. But and this is where I was trying to get with this, was I think his value was really high on coverage units, and we let him go.
Yeah.
We strictly let him go and thought we could replace him with whoever. And that just screams that you don't value special teams players. Look at the Patriots, for example. Matthew Slater.
Did you have to use them as an example?
I have to. I'm sorry.
I know.
Matthew Slater is a 6-time Pro Bowler on special teams, and he's like a 10-year vet. And they have not gotten rid of him because his value on special teams is tremendous. Last night,
he's like the Steve Tasker, right?
He truly is, and I would say he's even better than Steve Tasker because
that guy's a Hall of Famer. Wow.
Right. Last night he had a down punt inside the 5-yard line, and then he had another one inside the 10. So, I mean, he himself single-handedly kept that field position in their favor last night. So just think about that. One guy, and you could have signed Jeff Janis for what, maybe $1 million, somewhere around there. Is he worth it for that type of production that you get from him? Hell yes.
Yeah.
So I just never understood why even Jarrett Bush towards the end of his career, why he wasn't brought back and valued because he was an integral part of that 2010 run to win the Super Bowl. He was very valuable on special teams. Very, very valuable.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the outlook and how the team values special teams is going to change. I'm not saying they need to make it, a humongous priority, but I've often said they just, under the Ted/Mike regime, they treated it, or McCarthy regime, they treated it as a necessary evil.
Right.
Which is a terrible way to look at 1/3 of the football operation, if you will, but that's what they did.
But that's just the stupidest analogy, because you know what? All three of those facets of the team will have a say in a game. Game, or in all games, I should say, but they'll have a facet in one game or the other. Like last night, the defense and special teams helped the Patriots win. So you think about that. If they didn't have the special teams last night, where would that game would have been? I mean, the Rams would have had better field position instead of getting their ball tucked inside the 20-yard line. So the field position today is so huge. It's so big. If you can keep teams pinned back and they got to go a full 60 yards just to get in field goal range, more power to you.
And I hope J.K. Scott can turn it around, my God, because they drafted that guy in the 5th round and he was booming kicks, but he had worse stats than who's the guy? Mastay? Was that the guy they cut?
Vogel. Justin Vogel.
I'm way behind. Jeez, sorry. Coma showing up. Vogel. He ended up with worse stats than Vogel, who they let go to draft him. Now, full weather or whatever, but looking at that draft last year with Gutekunst too, I'm going, you spent 2 draft picks on special team specialists. I'm sitting here saying special teams is important. Yeah, I am, but drafting a punter in the 5th round and then drafting a long snapper, spending 2 draft picks on those, that I don't think is a good idea.
Well, we'll see. The jury is not out yet. I mean, 1 year. We'll see.
I think if Scott can get live up to his potential this year, then he'll definitely be seen as a weapon. If not, that was a wasted pick.
But you also have to consider that your special teams coach was Ron Zook.
No kidding. I'll never forget that lasting image. What was it? Was it versus the Lions?
The Lions on the fake field goal.
The fake. He has his hands, his arms crossed on the sideline. He's looking out there, and
no clue.
Just oh boy. Not that it really mattered, but yeah. And then they got to develop young receivers. It sounds like too that they're going to be bringing back Jimmy Graham. I was very surprised by that. I mean, it's not certain, but there's a lot of. It looks like they're going to pick up that option, which I think is fucking stupid, in my opinion. Simply because they let Jordy go a year early, and now they got an outside free agent who can't run, and they're talking about picking up a huge option for him. I don't know.
Well, who else do you think? Who else do you have?
I would rather draft a young tight end, even if he's not a superstar, not a top whatever talent, and then go with Tanyan than spend that amount of money on a guy who looks like he can't run.
So you want to go with another Tom Crabtree, is what you're saying. Who
might be a tinge faster and a hell of a lot less money, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
An undrafted free agent. An undrafted free agent.
He won the Super Bowl with Crabtree. He had a touchdown in that playoff game. No, I love Crabtree. But I mean, your point's well taken. But look at Jimmy Graham. He can't run. He's slow. He's not a good blocker. Father Time caught up to him. It's not his, that was on paper it looked okay, but we found out, they always say it's better to get rid of a player a year too early than a year too late. Well,
right.
The Seahawks got rid of him a year too early and not a year too late, right? And they let him go to free agency and all that. And the Packers, it did not work. And maybe was it McCarthy and his offense? Who knows? But all I know is looking at Graham, he's lost a step and maybe 2 steps, and but he's 30. So you can't spend $13 million on that guy.
I'm not denying that he's lost speed, but I mean, Rob Gronkowski's lost speed, and he was integral to them winning last night.
Sorry, you can't compare.
Why can't you?
Because Gronkowski's a once in a generation talent,
So
yeah, he's slow, but Jimmy Graham's a nice player. Was a nice player, but Gronkowski's a once in a generation talent. He's like a Tony Gonzalez.
Gronkowski never had 100 receptions in a year. Jimmy Graham did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right now, would you take Gronkowski or Graham? I think we know the answer to that question.
I'm going to go against conventional wisdom, and I'm going to take neither.
I like that. I mean, Gronk is probably going to retire.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's been banged up. We know that, but he's, again, I consider him like a generational talent. Jimmy Graham is a very good player, but not quite the same league in my personal opinion. But yeah. Jimmy Graham 3 years ago would have been great, but I don't know. Maybe what I'm kind of getting at with that decision is that's a kind of decision that it's a tough decision, but you need to make it, and we know what the right decision is.
Mm-hmm.
And the Packers aren't going to do that, is what I'm getting at. It appears they're not going to do that.
Yeah, we'll see.
It hasn't been announced, but all signs are pointing they're going to pick up his option. If they do, I think it's very stupid.
They don't have a lot of time to decide either, because I think that has to happen in March.
I think March 1. I think is when he's due his big old bonus or whatever. But the other guy, I mean, what do you do with Nick Perry?
You get rid of him.
I 100% agree.
I would say I would say first you go to him and say, you know what, the production's not there. We need you to take a lower salary. If he doesn't take the lower salary, then you cut him. But there's no way that we can afford to pay this guy a double-digit salary when we've received 3.5 sacks in 2 years.
Oh my God, the guy! I feel bad for the guy in a way. I mean, he gets hurt a lot, but the other thing is he's not a 3.
No.
He's not a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's so miscast in that role.
Yep.
That's on Ted.
And that's you're right. And that's the tough part is I feel like we're unfair by saying that he's not producing when I don't think he's playing in the position of his strength. I truly don't think he is.
No, I agree.
But he is put in that position, and that's where we're at. So
yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, but what the hell happened to him this last year? I forgot he was on the fucking team, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, his big play was the strip fumble in the Bear game in the first game of the year. That was his big play. That sealed the game.
When I watch him play, he looks very slow and laboring.
Right,
is that
because
fair?
He's in space, and he's not a guy that is meant to be.
But even when he rushes the passer, but I mean, when an outside linebacker, it's different leverage than
right
and whatnot than a 4-3 end. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when you're seeing him, and he's just his body is like. He reminds me of like a Richard Rodgers kind of body, that tight end. I mean, he's got this really big kind of just bumbling body, but he's obviously got a ton of strength and all that. But man, you would go multiple games without hearing his name called once.
Right.
Jeez Louise. And he's like your top 3 salary guy. That's oh boy. What about Clay Matthews?
I would like to see him back, but obviously at a reduced salary. If we could get him for like $4 or $5 million, I mean, is he going to be more productive than Ahmad Brooks was 2 years ago? I think so.
Do you have him move inside?
I think you do. I think what we've seen from him from the inside, it's what's on tape is good. The negative to that is because he's so ultra aggressive, he does tend to play
over pursue
sometimes. Yeah. Right.
What I guess he was one of those players who he had a really short window of dominance. 3 years, if that. You know what I mean? Basically, rookie year, not even really rookie year, because he was hurt a bit, and so we'll say, obviously, the 2000 Super Bowl, he almost won the Defensive Player of the Year. Probably should have. And then 11. So he had such a short window. So he went from like elite Pro Bowler to like average, like bam, you know? He didn't have like a slow drop off. He was 3 years and then gone, and then just a guy.
Right.
You know? And I look at him hustling, and he does, but when was the last time he took over a game? When was the last time he got multiple sacks in a game? It's just, and you look at all these players, and they're making a ton of money, and they're just, again, these are tough decisions and I look at, going back to the Patriots, I look at a guy like Clay Matthews. Clay Matthews would have been traded in 2013 by Belichick, and he would have gotten a first-round pick for him. He would probably traded him in season in 2013 for a first-round pick.
I don't think that's too far from the truth, because
do you remember what he did to Richard Seymour
and Chandler Jones?
Yeah, Richard Seymour, Hall of Fame defensive lineman. He traded him, I think, in season. Yeah, to the Raiders. Now, I mean, he wasn't like, he was a little bit falling off, but it wasn't like he was at he wasn't terrible by any means. Still probably above average, and I mean, that's how ruthless that guy was.
The guy was an inside the locker room type move. It sounded like he got on Belichick's shitty side. So,
really,
but it was a good move. It was a good move.
I'm not okay. You're talking Chandler Jones, or are you talking Richard Seymour?
Richard Seymour. Okay. Chandler Jones was he was a year from his contract year, and they wanted to get rid of him while they could get something in return, and they got great value in return from him. I think they got a first-round pick for him. So,
they have 12 picks in the upcoming draft.
It's just not fair.
Six of them in the top 3 rounds.
It's not fair. Just not fair. But they only have 19 million.
If anybody, I look at anybody and I go, if anybody makes a trade with the Patriots, they're dumb. Any team that makes a trade with the Patriots, you're fucking stupid.
Or you're calling out the lynch mob.
You know what I mean? That's the first thing I think. I'm like, you are just gonna, yeah.
Well, and the funny thing about that is the Patriots would find a way of getting the leg up on that trade too.
Oh yeah, I mean they're going to get what they need, and they're going to fleece the other team. I got to think that that's something that terrifies other teams. Is that they'll either let some guy go or they'll trade him to the Patriots and he'll become a star on the team while he was just middling with them. That's probably a fear of every team with a lot of their players. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
God.
And then another coach just got hired from the Patriots to be the Miami Dolphins head coach.
That gives a shit.
Another one. But the coaching tree is...
His coaching tree is not good.
It's not good, but there are so many coaches getting there that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously but it is kind of funny because sometimes you'd swear that these teams they think that Belichick's coming with.
Oh, right.
the coach they're hiring, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
So,
good point.
Well, that's about all I really have. There isn't a whole lot other stuff going on. I think we hit on the big points with Packers offseason stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they get to start offseason a couple weeks early because they have a new coaching staff, so maybe that'll help. But it's wait for the draft and free agency and see what happens there. I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, March is going to be a big month. Kind of see where this team decides to.
I mean, even OTAs. I'm curious. When was the last time you saw there was an OTAs where you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Well, it's been 13 years because now you got a new head coaching, new head coach. So I'm actually looking forward to stuff like that.
I am thrilled to see what this team is going to be. I'm thrilled to see what a young Matt LaFleur is going to bring. What kind of juice he's going to bring. I am
very, very, to your point, I'm fascinated to see what Rodgers will do with a different offense.
Right.
Because I think he's been held back by just such an ridiculously easy to defend and whatever offense for so long that we're going to find out how coachable he is too, because so many people think and claim that he's some kind of a coach killer. I think this is put up or shut up time for a lot of people, including him.
Yeah, it is. It's a very it's an exciting time to be a Packer fan, but also it does bring some nervousness, because the uneasiness of what we don't know is going to happen is still there.
Well, nothing lasts for. I mean, they had since Ron Wolf, was that 91 or 91, I guess. Up until now, it had been that kind of a structure and that kind of stability and winning and consistency. And now you have the quadrilateral authority. So we're going to have to see how that goes. I'm really curious. I wonder how much longer Murphy is with the team. I'm curious on that. I don't know how long his contract is. Is he on a contract? He is, but then it's the board. I don't understand all the dynamics of the board of directors and executive committee and things like that in terms of renewing them and all that. I guess I'm just, I don't know.
Honestly, it would take a catastrophic fall to the 80s. It would take that kind of fall before he would ever be considered tossed out to the street. I mean, his job is probably one of the safest jobs out there.
But you think, regardless, say, to your point, I mean, it could easily go back to the 80s, though. There's, in my opinion,
very easy.
Because some of the shit they're doing, just, I don't know. It looks very much like what they were doing in the 80s, with structure-wise, corporate stuff. So how long is this contract for? I don't know.
It's tough I've tried to do some searching and digging on that, and I can't find anything about a contract or even a structure.
Yeah. Here's basically the way I look at it. I mean, I'm really hard on Murphy, and I give him a lot of shit, and I think me personally, I think there's some validity because of some of the silly things he's done, and he's kind of a silly guy himself. But what I ultimately comes down to is almost like a player on a team, in the sense that if they can do better, they should.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's where it seems to be at with the GM, coach. And I mean, now I think it's the same with Murphy. I think they can do better.
They could. I just don't think internally
they will.
They will.
And it's a risk, that's obviously very...
And it's different with him because, I mean, he's almost like the in-between of a GM and an owner. You're right.
He's like a hybrid. He's like a hybrid.
Right. And that makes it very unique in its structure-wise, because how do you handle that? Well, we don't have anybody that really holds him accountable except for the board of directors. So,
I'll ask you this, and that's a good point. So look at Harlan. Murphy was, but he was completely hands-off, right?
Right.
And obviously they were very successful. I mean, it's success on the field, business success. They got the new stadium under him, all that. But Harlan was Murphy, except he didn't meddle in anything.
Exactly.
And I mean, Murphy really wasn't meddling in anything until last year and then this year. So, to your point, he is kind of in between, but Harlan was in some respect too, but there's a clear line. He gave full control to the GM.
Right.
We talked about that kind of ad nauseum, before Wolf came in and all that stuff. And there's a reason people do that. It's because it works. Now, is the NFL changing and all that? Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, but I keep hearing, when you hear about, Russ Ball almost becoming a GM, and he was basically the GM while Ted was, supposedly, there's been rumors, I'm not saying this is the truth, but that Ted was ill, he had some medical issues, and Ball might have been essentially the de facto GM while that's going on. And if that's true, that's terrible.
Okay.
You don't have a GM, or excuse me, you don't have a bean counter.
Right.
Evaluating personnel.
Right. So if that is true, then who truly decided that was the path that they should take? Was that Murphy?
It had to have been.
Or was it?
Oh, was it Ted?
Yeah. See, I don't think Murphy had a lot of involvement in the team until he was pretty much emailed the next day and said, "Hey, you got a problem." You know, I mean, because think about this: when the Packers had Mike Sherman, and they inexplicitly, for some dumb reason, gave Mike Sherman the dual role as a coach and GM.
Remember who did that? Harlan did that.
Yes, but he had no problem 2 years after the fact realizing he made a mistake and dumping him. You know, like you said, Harlan did a really good job of hiring the people underneath him to do the job, but he had no problem stepping in when there was an issue. And obviously there was a huge issue with Sherman. Now, did Murphy do the same thing here with McCarthy?
Yeah, that's a good point. No, that's a very good. I haven't really looked at it that way. That's a very good point. I think there are some parallels there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, the one thing that's the whole Russ Ball, Ted Thompson, Mark Murphy thing. That's one thing we don't know. Was it Ted who maybe said, "Okay, I'm going to let," you know, maybe he quote unquote made that decision, and Murphy, yeah. And we don't want to go conspiracy theory here. This is all just hearsay, but it is interesting, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, in years past, the last few years, Murphy was heavily involved in the Titletown development. And
yeah, he was never really that directly involved with the team until last year.
Right.
You know, he was doing the Titletown thing for 3 or 4 years straight. He was the business guy, you know.
Right.
He was Harlan, only he was like Harlan, even more business type stuff, you know.
Exactly.
Which is fine. But yeah, you know, maybe there was just some ominous piece of communication or something that happened, or if something was so egregious somewhere where he's like, "Oh my God, I have to overcompensate and get in here and fix this before, you know, the shit really hits the fan." I mean, maybe, who knows? And I mean, look, it's still early. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. And I just don't like the fact that apparently, you know, you see things are going downhill for years, and they were too late in getting rid of Ted, you know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and that was the sad part, is because it was so late. Now we're feeling the repercussions of it for how long? You know, is it going to be the third year now? I don't know.
He had multiple bad drafts, and if for a team that drafts and develops and doesn't do much of anything else, that will kill you.
Right.
One bad draft is bad enough, but if you have 2 or 3, forget it. So.
Right. And considering that we were one of the youngest teams in the league,
yeah,
you know, there's not a lot of leeway there if you make mistakes like we did.
Yeah, and when I asked you what was the before the podcast, what was the median age? You saw the Patriots were basically the 3rd oldest team in the league,
right?
Age-wise, and I mean that's what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot of veterans, you know, a lot of experience, and that's what you saw. And I mean, the Packers, I think might have been top 10. It's not like they were way, you know, young, but they were in the top 10. But that's what I would kind of expect too. But the Patriots value experience, like you even said, they got veterans on special teams and all those kinds of things. So
that's what I hope that this new administration will do, is if they feel like their 11 best special teamers are going to be starters, put them out there. At this point, I don't think you can protect anybody because we have nothing to protect anymore. We got to win, you know?
Well, they also got to, I mean, you got to be fearful for your job, you know? And it sounds like it was really cushy under the past few years with McCarthy, and nobody complacent. You hear that word complacency and all this kinds of stuff, and there really wasn't that fear for your job. And
no, and that's come out this offseason.
And that's not good
at all.
Players, you know,
right?
In a league like football, like the NFL, where that's how, you know, competition is everything. You know,
exactly. You have to have competition that breeds success. And when David Bakhtiari comes out and says that this team is too complacent, you're probably your best player besides Aaron Rodgers. That's a huge problem. Huge problem.
And he said it openly. And I mean, and that was permeating from McCarthy. That was permeating from Ted. The whole thing that it needed to pull the plug on that if all that's true, because Patriots, they're churning over the bottom third of their roster all the time. Ruthless, like trading away players mid-season, you know. It's so yeah, that's about all I got, bud.
Yeah. offseason in full effect, and we'll keep on following it and seeing what goes on here. But a very important offseason for the Packer administration and for this team, and I'm kind of excited to see how things turn out. I really am.
No doubt, and I would say this is the most intriguing, more important offseason since, I guess you could say 2005, but I would almost venture back to like railroads, that kind of stuff. This is like the most important offseason in 20 years.
Podcast.
I know, right?
So, all right, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.
See you later.